Welcome to Perspectives with Wenchi Yu, where we discuss Trump 2.0's policies and politics and their implications for Asia, China, Taiwan, and beyond. Chinese consumers are deeply integrated into the country's multifunctional and interactive digital platforms like WeChat, Taobao, and Douyin. These platforms, including the latest powerful force, Xiaohongshu, or known as Red Note, have fundamentally transformed not only consumer behavior, but also the entire world of advertising, branding, and marketing. To discuss this seismic shift, we're joined by Bryce Whitwam, a marketing veteran with decades of experience in Asia. Having spent 17 years in China leading major advertising agencies and founding his own, Bryce contributed a chapter to the book, Selling to China, and highlighted the speed of this digital revolution, noting that it took WeChat just 1 year to reach 100 million users, a milestone that took Facebook 4 years to achieve. Bryce now teaches at Loyola University Chicago and co-hosts the Shanghai Zhan podcast. Bryce, welcome to our show. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm super excited about today's episode because I'm really into China's e-commerce and social media marketing, branding, all that stuff. And you're such an expert. But let's start with how you started your China journey.
Well, I'm really happy to be here, Wenchi. I think not to bore your listeners too much with my life story, but it really came from when I first went to China. In 1987, I was an English teacher at a university in Beijing. And not only that, I was 2 years before that, Kerr Gibbs, who was on your podcast, he taught exactly at the same exact school. So it's just what a coincidence. We both taught at the Beijing University of Science and Technology.
He didn't mention that. I had no idea. So you knew each other way back.
Yeah, I know. It's usually something that we don't want to talk about because usually people freak out and go, oh, you're that old. Yeah, I mean, I was 23. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. The job market wasn't great for political science, Russian studies majors, which is I was studying. And I got an opportunity to be an English teacher in Beijing. So I went for it and kind of changed my life. I did that for a year, and then I went on to Taiwan. I knew that if I really wanted to make a career in China, I needed to perfect my Chinese. And at the time, I was also riddled with student loan debt, which I needed to pay off. And the difference at that time between English teachers in Taiwan, which you got about $25 an hour cash, tax-free, or at that time in Beijing, I got paid 500 renminbi a month, which is at that time equivalent to $75 a month. It was a big difference. So I went to Taiwan, and then so I studied my Mandarin. Or I got my master's MBA, and then I went back to Taiwan, where I started my marketing research career. I started there at AC Nielsen, the marketing research company. I did that for 3 years. Then I moved to a company in Hong Kong. Then I was in Thailand for 5 years. And then in 2005, I started at Ogilvy in Shanghai. I moved up to Beijing, and then I was there for 2 years, moved back to Shanghai. And I was in China for 17 years after that and held senior roles in various agencies. I subsequently left Shanghai in 2022. And I'm living in New York now, as we talked about before the show.
Let's just focus on your specialty, which is marketing. And what happened then? You wrote a chapter for Kerr Gibbs' book, which was fascinating. I strongly recommend everyone to read it. But I want you to go through that with our audience.
Things were things were growing a lot. 2005, 2007, the Olympics happened. People started to really take notice of China. I was working at Wonderman, and we had the Land Rover business. I started with Land Rover when I was there in 2008. And I remember they were selling 3,000 cars, all imported from UK. And literally, fast forward to 2014, they hit the 100,000 mark. It's like unbelievable, right? In that short of time, they went from 3,000 to 100,000 cars, making China the largest market for Land Rover in the world. And it was just literally people would go to the auto shows with bags of cash. Can you believe it? Like bags and bags of cash, and buy cars right on the showroom floor of the
So would you say, because you started with those agencies, right? And these are Western agencies whose role at that time clearly was to help import foreign brands into China when Chinese consumers are just becoming wealthy and really wanted foreign brands.
I don't think we help them import. Many of our clients, for example, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, they had been in China long. Nestle, they had been in since the late 80s. We helped them market products to Chinese consumers. My client, specifically Land Rover, was definitely an import business. My other client, Ford, they manufactured in Chongqing. It was really about marketing to them, being able to introduce them to, in this case, either a luxury lifestyle or convenience or something that they haven't tried before, like Pizza Hut or something. It was always about introducing them to something new and exciting.
I guess what I'm trying to say is like China at that time wanted foreign stuff.
Yeah, I think that there was, in certain markets, there was a greater desire for foreign products. But that's not to say that the number one toothpaste brand at that time was not Colgate, it was Yunnan Baiyao. So, I mean, it depends on the category, really. Yeah. In tier 1 markets and tier 2 markets, there was a huge desire for foreign brands, as if there were brands that would show face, that you could outwardly, experience from an outside. Who would spend 35 renminbi for a cup of coffee, But yeah, you would, because that Starbucks cup would give you sense of status. It was about being statusful and showing that off. So any products like that were immensely successful. But so I think that people were just into anything that was new and was innovative and refreshing, and that provided, and especially it provided them that sense of status. They wanted those in a big way.
And how was 2010 different?
I think it's really about the e-commerce digital age that really came to light at that time. And Taobao started much earlier than that, but it was really started when you started to have e-commerce and social commerce, which made shopping immensely convenient for a whole bunch of consumers. Because the reality was, before that, brands always had distribution challenges, even the big ones. Yes, there were brands like Coca-Cola, you could find it everywhere, but some brands you could not find in many tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 markets. And if you think about it, that's the majority of Chinese people live in tier 5. They don't live in tier 1. Distribution was always a challenge. And in 2010, that challenge was eliminated, because now you could buy from anywhere in China, and you could experience those things, and they could be delivered right to your doorstep, regardless of where you lived.
I remember having a guest, Lu Gang, who is the founder of TechNode, on my show. He also said basically he would put 2010 to 2013 or 12, around that time, the digital revolution, introduction of WeChat, the 3G, 4G network, as the watershed moment in how China consumes, as well as how China does business. And according to what you wrote, you kind of felt the same way. Can you elaborate on how advertising marketing is very different because of the introduction of those platforms?
Yeah, because it's all about reach and frequency. And it's always in a traditional market environment where you have to rely on things like television, outdoor, radio, print. Those things make it enormously challenging to reach large swaths of audience who, in this case, China in the old days in television was very, very fragmented. There's thousands of stations, local stations. And yes, brands could, blanket CCTV 1 during news time, and they get noticed. And secondly, during the early 2000s, the 2005, 7, 8, 9 era, we saw a lot of video channels, Youku, Tudou, these kind of platforms that would have a lot of video content. And we found that massive amounts of millennials, Gen Zs, young people were like migrating to those channels for entertainment. To a large extent, the censorship board in China at that time couldn't really get their head around digital. And it was always kind of a known fact that if you put a TV ad on, you were heavily censored. But digital advertising, there was a little bit more flexibility. You could see a lot of different, unique kind of programming, and a lot of experimentation that went on during that time on digital platforms. And it was clear that a large portion of our target audience consumers were flocking there for just entertainment. So it's very important at that time that we be there. WeChat, to a certain extent, it revolutionized how people contacted on a direct one-to-one basis. But we can't, leave out Alibaba's growth and strength and how that really changed things, how platforms became islands amongst themselves, and that every aspect of your life could be covered within a platform. You could literally go on and do anything on a Chinese platform. Platforms were always geared towards trying to keep you there as long as they possibly could. And that meant entertaining you, providing you all sorts of different information, and obviously moving you from the awareness stage down to the purchase stage, all within the same platform. So you could find out and discover new products and then purchase them right on the spot.
So what does that mean for advertising? I think Facebook in the US revolutionizes advertising, but Facebook is still not as multifunctional as something like WeChat or any of those very popular Chinese platforms. Since their platforms can do so much and really attracts eyeballs, what does that mean for advertising companies?
Yeah, I mean, the original model was set up towards what we called a 360-degree approach, or what David Ogilvy referred to as the big idea. And that, to a certain extent, still exists, but less so now. And that was that you came up with a big idea based on a consumer insight, and that you would take that idea and you would spread it out amongst all these different channels. Your goal was to be able to impact people's decision-making process when they were actually in the store. So when you were actually in the convenience store looking at the different beverage choices in front of you, you recalled those Coca-Cola or those Pepsi ads, and you immediately, after all that recall, you purchased the product. So that's how it kind of worked. Essentially what the digital marketing aspect of China and the US was that it kind of did away with that approach. And now digital advertising is more about being at the right place at the right time. It's more about placement of the advertisement, not necessarily the idea itself that has changed. In other words,
yeah, I thought that part of it. You also wrote about that in the chapter for Kerr's book. For our generation or even older, you think about advertising agencies, you think about like truly creative ideas, right? Apple advertising, a commercial, or Coca-Cola. People are eager to wait for what is the most exciting advertisements or commercials. But what you're saying is that since the digitization of marketing, it's different. It's less about ideas, big ideas, but it's more about how you populate these ideas in front of people, right?
That's right. So, and that's becoming even more challenging now with short form video and influencer content. And people are not looking necessarily to be interrupted by advertising. Advertising, to a large extent, even on places like YouTube, it's a disruption. You have to hit your skip, you wait like everyone else, waiting for that skip button to appear so you can click it as fast as you possibly can. So disruptive advertising in itself is kind of dead. And brands now are looking at ways to be able to immerse themselves in people's lives and be able to create content experiences that disrupt them effectively. Nowadays, it's really about short form video and how that immerses you within the experience. So brands aren't necessarily doing what we call a 30-second ad or a 15-second spot where we're actually introducing things. Of course, those things still exist, but a large extent, those things have been done away with. And you're looking at more content experiences that disrupt your daily life and provide you inspiration and ideas and things that can make your lives better because you're bored and life sucks and you hate your job, and this thing that you could buy that could send directly to your home will make all things better, and it'll just make you a lot happier. So why don't you give it a shot?
Well, since you talk about short form, we have to share with our audience some of the more interesting platforms. Redbook is one of them. Douyin is one of them. For those in America, in the West, who don't have Douyin or TikTok or Xiaohongshu, can you share what are they and how did they become so popular?
Okay, let's start with Douyin. That's an easy one because Douyin is essentially TikTok. When people ask me, well, what's social media like? What's social commerce and what's social media like in China versus the US? I said, go on TikTok. And they're like, well, certainly TikTok has got to be different in China. To a certain extent it was, but now more and more of the similar features on TikTok in the US, you can find them on Douyin. They're very, very similar. So if you're familiar with TikTok, you know Douyin. Xiaohongshu, a red note as you called it. Red note is a different type. It's kind of a Pinterest meets Instagram kind of platform, which includes lifestyle content specifically towards women. Red note audience is usually skewed female tier 1, so 80% female. It's all centered around lifestyle tips and hobbies and things around that, either through fashion, beauty tips, art, travel. Red note is a great platform because it's so well organized. Instead of like TikTok, which it kind of comes at you and you're totally relying on the algorithm to serve you content if you choose the For You channel. Red Note can be search driven. It's about finding places. Overseas Chinese use it to find restaurants and hotels in the West and other places. It's got travel information and it's structured very well. It has a whole page of different content for you to choose, and you can see something that's interesting to you, somewhat like using YouTube on a mobile phone. And you can just choose the most interesting content and click on it. It could be video, it could be still pictures, but it's usually very informative. There's usually much more writing involved, and there's always people that chime in and provide suggestions. It's very community-led as well. It's a very, very friendly platform for brands. Brands tend to like Red Note, especially cosmetics and beauty brands. Their target audience is there, and it's a place where people discover new things. So it's more of a discovery kind of educational platform, whereas Douyin is much more about lying on your bed before you go to bed at night, or sitting on your sofa and just swiping and swiping and swiping like kids do on TikTok.
Yeah. And how are they different from the social media platforms Americans are more familiar with?
Well, I think that there's nothing like Red Note in the US. If Pinterest went towards video content, it might be a kind of a very much look like Red Note. The difference between TikTok and Douyin, as I said, there's not a lot of difference from a platform perspective, but obviously from a content perspective, it will be very, very different.
And what is driving so much of the intensity of social media? Because it's hard to find anything equivalent in the US. And I constantly wonder why. Is it because the consumers in China just need a lot more? Is it because competition's so fierce that's driving those platforms to be so multifunctional?
One thing is distribution. Even in 2025, there's still gaps within shopping experiences. If you go to Europe, people hardly shop at all online. They go to stores. They might validate their purchases online, but they certainly won't buy on store. The second reason that it's popular is because it was always established as a live streaming, and live stream shopping was always a kind of a form of entertainment and discovery. So it was kind of set up in the early days on Alibaba's Taobao, where you could have these long-form live stream video experiences, which generally could be upwards of 6 to 8 hours long, and they were just massive amounts of products and very, very big discounts. If you're going to get a good deal on something, and I'm talking sometimes around 40% discount on a cosmetic or a beauty product, so it's definitely worth checking out. So it was almost inescapable not to follow these type of live stream experiences. So people got accustomed to this way of investigating shopping experiences. I mean, but having said that, nowadays in the US, 65% of Gen Z said that they bought something because they were influenced by an influencer. So in many aspects, that type of influencer marketing approach is very much being a part of this market as well. You don't see the live stream shopping experiences on places like TikTok as much as you do in China yet, but I predict that will change. I predict that it will become much more synonymous with your brand's experiences that you can actually connect. Because if I talk to 100 Americans, probably 80 would say that they find that the live stream is kind of annoying. On the other hand, I did talk to a lot of people who find it quite authentic, and they found it real, and they felt that he could actually talk to a human being. And you think about in our AI world, it's kind of nice to have that kind of experience and that people can actually interact with person that they're buying something from. And live streaming does provide that experience. So I think that overall, it's proven that it's a successful tactic in other parts outside of China, definitely within Southeast Asia, and it'll slowly become a part of our lives as well.
I'm going to read something you wrote before. What took the global platform Facebook 4 years to reach 100 million users, WeChat got in only a single year. And China's latest obsession with short video platforms has also seen a massive transformation in how the Chinese engage in content. TikTok's China twin, Douyin, has gained enormous popularity, achieving 600 million daily active users as of 2021. I assume the stats is even more today.
Absolutely. They've definitely not slowed down.
And then we're going to, talk about the implications of such popular platforms and what does that mean given the geopolitical situation. But before we get into that, given the nimbleness and also the responsiveness to consumers in China, inevitably, first, I think foreign brands will have to learn how to use those social media platforms in order to market to their consumers in a new way, right? And then second, it probably also gave rise to domestic brands in China, which is called Guo Chao. Can you explain to people what caused the switch and gave rise to domestic brands? And today, we can talk about it later, just the brands in China, in my view, are just going to take over much of the industries.
Wow, that's a big prediction. So essentially, with the rise of short video platforms and social media and e-commerce, there was also a lot of information available for any brand, global, local brands, to be able to really truly understand consumers. And that means that you can almost literally understand what people want in real time. Just use the pet food category in China as a brilliant example. There was pet food additives or benefits that were so anthropomorphic. They're taking on human characteristics. Of course, pet food always does, right? The people buying the dog food, not the dog. Pet food for improving skin care, skin quality of your dog, and giving it a radiant glow. And some of these things were just really taken off of platforms like Alibaba's platform in terms of what consumers were looking for. And I think that really struck a chord with a lot of local brands. And they were able to create a lot of new and exciting products that maybe the global brands weren't really inclined to make those kind of those changes.
Is it because the products itself just doesn't resonate with the Chinese consumers as much, or is it more about marketing and branding?
Are you saying that the Western products don't resonate with Chinese consumers? Is that what you mean, or are you saying?
Yes,
okay.
Yes. Like what's causing the decline of interest in West? Let's say if you're just talking about Starbucks, right? We can use that as an example. Starbucks versus Luckin, for example.
Yeah, that's a hard one to say because I still think Starbucks is a great brand. It's still very popular in China. Luckin has huge, deep pockets. They're distributed everywhere. It's hard to avoid them in many ways. The problem that Starbucks has, and Chinese and Western brands face this in China, is that Chinese consumers are so addicted to new products and new product innovations because yes, China is the manufacturing base of the world, so brands can come up with things. For example, let's talk about a very innovative Western brand, KFC. KFC is coming out with a new food innovation every month in China. There's no local food company in China, to my knowledge, that can keep up with them. I could say that about L'Oreal or Estee Lauder as well. They've learned essentially in China, if you want to play the game, you have to constantly deliver innovative stuff. You can't stick onto one particular product category. And you've seen very successful beauty brands. And Nike's still number one. Yes, Anta is picking up share, and the local brands have kind of taken over some of the second and third and fourth places. But Nike's still an innovative brand, and they still leading in the category. So it doesn't, yes, we could talk about cars as being different, but if you expect to not be able to be dynamic and be able to change with the desires of the Chinese consumers, which is this is very quick and fast, then you will face decline. And I think the challenge that Starbucks might have is that they're kind of being seen as a tired brand, that they, at one point, people really looked up to them, and I think they still do, but they haven't really maybe innovated as fast enough as maybe some of the local entities, and as therefore have lost market share.
It sounds like you need to constantly have new, fresh products in order to satisfy Chinese consumers.
And essentially, the amount of data available to you through many of these e-commerce platforms, that the amount of content and the interest in consumers can fuel your product innovation track. So in other words, that the more information that you know or have about what consumers like in particular subcategories, you can take a risk and start developing products to meet those needs. One of the things that the Chinese brands have done is that they'll come up with 10 new product ideas, like 9 of them suck and 1 of them is amazing. But the difference here is that they were willing to take the risk of launching 10 products and just seeing what sticks. Now, with the economy the way it is, brands are more prudent and they're more cautious than they used to be. But yeah, back in the day, that was the case, that they would launch multitudes of failed products and then hopefully that one would be successful.
That's what you said, moving forward with failure idea.
That's right.
Yeah, you basically just throw it out. And I think that in the US, the approach might have been more prudent rather than just not feeling quite ready and you already make your products available. It's probably also just not so much capital to burn these days, probably. I want to come back to, when do you feel like there's that switch between admiration of foreign brands and now the willingness and even preference of domestic brands?
I think it goes through each category, and you see it through evolutions of categories. And initially, certain particular products in that category are foreign brands are conceived as seen as having, let's say, better quality, they provide better status, they overall have a greater longevity and trust from people. But those categories, maybe they might exist and certain brands will lead in those particular categories, but then they won't last for very long. So for example, televisions. Now, even in the US, like, okay, do people go to Best Buy and buy Sonys and Samsungs? No, they're Hisense and TCLs.
Not anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think to a certain extent, Chinese are no different, that they accept that Chinese televisions are as good or better, certainly a lot cheaper than a Japanese television. I grew up thinking that Sonys were the best product you could ever get. But nowadays, there's no difference. I think that's happened now with automobiles. I think that's happened with maybe, like, as you mentioned, the coffee products, that people would walk across the street to enjoy a Starbucks. Well, now there's a Luckin in the lobby of their office building. Just get a Luckin. Can't tell the difference anyway. It's the same coffee. I don't know if there are things that Chinese brands don't compete in. Luxury watches. I don't know of a Chinese watch brand that's destroyed the Swiss industry yet, but maybe someday they will.
Or luxury clothing or maybe purses. I still haven't seen like Louis Vuitton or any of those brands being challenged by their Chinese counterparts.
Yeah, and definitely that those type of the French and Italians, and to a certain extent the Brits, they've monopolized in that type of marketing strategy. Will there be local luxury brands from China at some point? I think so. But at this point, no. They're still reaching a desirable position in the market.
Well, like you said, it varies by industries. But I want to ask if you think the overall climate, U.S.-China relations also, not necessarily U.S.-China, but China and the West or foreign countries' relationship also had any impact on how Chinese consumers look at foreign brands. There's always boycotting of foreign brands whenever there were incidents between China and other countries. Do you feel like it had any role in Chinese consumers' choices?
I don't think so. I think that people think that you buy products for nationalistic purposes, that nationalism is a driver in buying a product. This is not a driver in Chinese minds, in Chinese consumers. Time and time again, it's been proven that Chinese will buy products based upon whether or not all those things that we just mentioned, that they're good quality, they give me face. There's something I'm used to. I mean, people still buy iPhones. People don't go and buy a Huawei because they're proud of China. And normally we always say that brands should never take the nationalist route. They could talk about it maybe in some elements of social media, or some influencers might talk about it. Huawei, they always keep their distance from all the pro-China crowd that's like is trying to encourage people to buy Huawei phones. They always keep their distance for good reason, and that's because people buy Huawei phones or they buy Oppo phones because they're good quality phones, not because they're made in China. And at the same time, that people will still separate the quality of their iPhone and Apple with, you know, whoever is president of this country. I think that there's no correlation between nationalism, politics, and consumer marketing choices.
But we have seen, perhaps it was more temporary, the boycotting of H&M, for example, Carrefour, some of these, because
But that's because the government encouraged platforms like Alibaba to close H&M. They deliberately got involved in encouraging this to happen. I don't think that it was just happening for no apparent reason, but to imagine that H&M couldn't sell their products on Alibaba was a total snub that had obviously higher implications in the government than just some executive at Alibaba made that decision. I think that's a different thing. If there's a movement where someday in Beijing where people go to the US embassy and they start smashing their iPhones and burning effigies of Tim Cook or something like that, and the government doesn't stop them and encourages this kind of activity to take place and spread this on social media, then yeah, you'll see an impact. But generally speaking, I don't think consumers themselves will consciously decide, damn those H&M people, I'm going to boycott them because of what they're saying about Xinjiang cotton is wrong.
Do you think consumers around the world are similar in that sense? I ask that question because you see that's being played out in the US as well towards certain Chinese brands, from TikTok to BYD or others.
Yeah, geez.
They tend to be high tech, but it sounds like the consumers still want those brands. You literally can't ban TikTok. Have you seen any countries' consumers influenced by nationalism?
Generally, what I said was that nationalism is not correlated to product purchase. I'm not going to buy a particular product just because I'm proud of my country if the product is not of great quality. I'm not saying that nationalism is not a considering factor, but it's not the most important one.
Got it. It's still a factor, I believe. Yeah.
I'm not going to buy a Ford F-150 if it's a piece of crap car. I wouldn't buy a Harley for that reason. They're terrible motorcycles. People at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, they'll consider all the other factors. The thing that's pushing them towards Chinese vehicles on TikTok is they look amazing and they're so affordable. Like, why can't we get that? Why can't we have that car in our country? It's almost like forbidden fruit, right? It's like something you can't have, Americans, but you can only see a picture of one, but you can't have it. And that just bugs the shit out of a lot of people.
The other trend is selling from China. It's been a couple years now. Even though Facebook and Google are banned in China, they're operating in China because they're e-commerce
huge
platforms, essentially.
Yeah.
And I don't think most Americans really understand that part.
I'll share this boring story. I think it was 2019. One of my colleagues who focuses on Amazon marketing in the US, he was coming to Ningbo, to China, to attend a Amazon meeting. That's what he told me what it was. And of course, I asked my colleagues if they wanted to join him, and nobody wanted to, which means that me, the CEO, had to go with him. Ningbo on the train, got to the hotel, and we said, okay, we're going to the meeting at another place, got in the taxi. I just assumed it was just going to be in a banquet room somewhere. We went to this stadium, there were 30,000 people there. It was full of suppliers. And this was like the greatest
What year was that?
Like 2019. 2018, just before, 2018, because COVID was 2009. 2018. It was the greatest moment. I was so proud to be an American at that point. There are over like 500,000 resellers on Amazon from China selling directly to consumers. And I just think people don't realize that much of the stuff that they buy on Amazon is coming directly from consumer, not from places might be made there, but it's actually coming directly from factories and manufacturers who are selling. And you're going to find more of that now with the tariffs. You're going to see, because why? I mean, the tariffs kind of play into Temu and Amazon and these and whatever, because these companies, they're not going to sell to, we've seen Forever 21 go bankrupt, right? We're going to see more retailers feeling the pinch because if they can cut out the middleman and sell directly to the consumer, they'll do it. So you're going to see many more Chinese brands and Chinese companies doing that because they can essentially eat the tariff and sell directly to the American consumer.
Fascinating. So let's talk about the tariffs impact. Also, I think there's a really important loophole, de minimis, that has contributed to this enormous growth of e-commerce between China and the US, mostly China selling to the US. The closure of this, what they call loophole, as well as tariffs, what will be the impact on Chinese suppliers trying to sell to the US?
Yeah.
Is that going to scare them off? Or, as you said, it'll actually encourage them to try to sell more?
There's no way that these companies in China are going to find alternative markets that have the size of the US. It's just not going to happen. They'll try to.
You mean like one single market?
Yeah, they're just going to say, oh, well, they can sell elsewhere, or that's not going to happen. They're going to find alternative places to manufacture. Yes, maybe, but the lion's share of Chinese manufacturers don't have that ability to do so. I think that what you'll see are direct-to-consumer opportunities. You see nowadays that even Temu, alive and well, opening up warehouses in the U.S. Shein, same thing, alive and well, opening up warehouses in the U.S. They are totally setting up for this direct-to-consumer kind of model. Amazon, of course, is as well taking advantage of it. And they'll find out more and more brands will taking those type of opportunities, offering high quality products that you would normally go to a department store like a Target or Walmart to buy, but buying them directly from Chinese suppliers.
Right when the Trump administration decided to close the de minimis loophole, we saw the news that Shein and Temu, their sales drop immediately. But you're saying regardless, people will continue to want to buy, and they're still setting up shops here. Maybe they'll just increase the prices because they were so cheap to begin with. But you think the demand and the business still makes a lot of sense?
Yeah, I think so, because there's a desire to supply and there is still a demand. And those things ultimately will come to head in a place where people can get the best deal possible. And in that situation, they will be in places where they will forego the middleman to be able to provide them the lowest possible prices. And they're still paying commissions to Temu and Shein. It's not free, right? I mean, it's essentially just a retailer, but in a different way. So Amazon, exactly the same thing. I predict that you will see many more of these manufacturers selling directly to consumers.
How would they sell directly, though? Don't they still need those platforms in order to sell? How do they reach the consumers?
There could be a number of ways. I'm not saying that all manufacturers have this ability. They could go through distribution brokers. They could set up websites. They could promote their products through social media channels and social commerce. They could easily offer alternative ways for people to buy the product directly from the manufacturer themselves and not having to go through these different entities. The reason they go through the partners is because most of these companies are not adept at marketing and distribution. They don't know how to actually reach the consumer. They don't have the skills. They know how to make stuff, but they don't know how to sell stuff. Like Anchor, for example, the electronics brand. They will take a more branded approach directly to the consumer, engage within social media platforms, talk to influencers, being able to sell directly through those channels as we further get deep into the tariffs. They will essentially reaching consumers with high quality products at relatively affordable prices. And that's the key thing, because as long as it's an affordable option, people will take advantage of it. You just need to be able to have the mindset and the knowledge to be able to attract and find those consumers.
So if you were to speak to the Trump administration officials in charge of tariffs policy, what would you say to them? Do you think they are going to achieve their goal, which is address the trade deficit issue?
What the stated message is to return jobs to the U.S. And that is, we've been being robbed by Chinese suppliers, especially in small town America, where a lot of manufacturing used to take place, and now it doesn't. And these companies, these Chinese companies or American companies, will have to manufacture here on American soil, and we won't have to import as much. But we know that the reality is that, yes, and to a certain extent, some companies will be able to do that. There's this mistaken belief that these type of factories hire lots of people in China and that they'll hire that same amount of people in the U.S. The reality is, if you've been to a modern factory in China these days, it's mostly robotic. It's very few people actually working there. Yeah. At the same time, it's not necessarily a guarantee that the products that they make from those factories will be any cheaper, and probably definitely won't be any cheaper the quality that they're getting from the imports. So I just think it's generally a failed policy, and what we'll see eventually is there'll be a huge backlash from consumers, that they see that their prices are increasing and that the cost of living is too high, and they'll vote with their feet and will eventually vote the Republicans out of office.
And you don't think it'll address the trade deficit issue?
No, because yes, there's a massive trade imbalance with China, because they're making stuff that we don't have the capacity to make it anymore. The trade imbalance exists because we are not allowed, and this is what they should be negotiating, we should be allowed to have insurance companies and banks and other types of services in China. We should be able to have entertainment and social media platforms. This is the bulk of the American export economy in 2025. Right. We should allow that type of freedom to happen in China. But the actual physical manufacture of goods, I just don't think that that's a wise decision.
Well, we're coming to the close. I'm always curious how people like you who spend decades doing business in China, how you see the future of this U.S.-China business relationship.
It is going through a cold phase at this point. A thriving capitalism always moves things forward in a positive way. I'm forever optimistic about the relationship and the economies of both countries, as long as they can work together. These are temporary setbacks. If we can get on the right track and start to collaborate on both sides and better collaborate in more meaningful ways, then everyone will prosper and benefit from that.
What would be a new kind of collaboration like? I mean, the reason why I ask is because I almost feel like China and the U.S. have flipped their positions over the last 20 years or so. Used to be China manufacturers, exporters to the US. China is learning from the US. And these days, China has better products. And we're going to see more and more. The US will have to learn from China in the way we do business produces. So what kind of relationship will it look like for the two to be able to collaborate?
That's a good question. I think that the relationship will be one where it's a mutually symbiotic, beneficial relationship. It's maybe not the one that we saw beforehand, where that we provided the IP, China did the manufacturing, and then they exported the stuff to us at a reasonable price. The new model will be much more mature and much more developed, where we will start to see maybe greater working relationships across different facets of industries and knowledge. And that will be a way that we'll start to provide further collaboration. There will always be a lot of differences and disagreements. If China's making better products, then how can we learn to make products of same quality and affordability? Isn't that necessarily what the Japanese did to the car industry in the 80s in this country? I don't think that China is hell-bent on spreading communist ideology to Americans. It's about ways that we can find competitive relationships building upon what we have and then making something better. If the Chinese can flip the relationship and they can come to our country and set up factories to make products of those high quality, then why not? This is exactly what we did to them in the 1980s and 90s, right? When we set up factories. So I think ultimately the relationship will always be there.
Both sides have to acknowledge and recognize each other's strengths and weaknesses and be willing to collaborate in order to benefit each other. It'll still take a few years to adjust, but I do think it'll come to that point because we're very practical people. Chinese for sure. Thank you so much for having this conversation.
Oh, it's great. Thanks for having me, Wenchi. It was a great conversation. I enjoyed it.
For a long time, foreign brands saw incredible growth in China, with market share sometimes exceeding their global sales. However, recent years have seen a significant shift. Due to geopolitical tensions and a failure to adapt to evolving consumer tastes, many foreign brands are losing ground to savvy Chinese competitors. The decline of brands like Starbucks in the face of rivals like Luckin is a prime example. What's more, these Chinese brands aren't just dominating their home market, they're expanding globally, leveraging nimble, digitally driven strategies to challenge their foreign counterparts worldwide. The next few years are set to be highly competitive. This is Perspectives with Wenchi Yu, where we analyze the policies and political strategies of Trump 2.0 and their implications for Asia, China, Taiwan, and beyond. Thank you for watching and listening. We value your feedback. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and podcast. See you next time.